This is the Mosh Pit Backstage podcast for punk, metal, and rock interviews and segments.
Hi everybody, this is Marcus of Blind Guardian speaking, and you're listening to the Mosh Pit on Sin. Stay tuned.
Marcus is a guitarist from German power metal band Blind Guardian, who are releasing a live album, Live Beyond the Spheres, on July 7th. Marcus, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thank you for your time. How are you doing?
Really good, and you're very welcome. Now, with titling a live album, I think it's really difficult at this stage because a lot of the great titles I think have already been come up with, like Iron Maiden and a bunch of other ones. How do you decide on the title for this album?
It's always a nightmare, you know. I perfectly remember when we looked for the title for the previous live album, and we had, like lists of name suggestions that were endless, and we didn't like anything. And in the end, it was Andre, Hansi, and me who came up all at the same time with, let's just call it Life, and be done with it. And this time, Life Beyond the Spheres, I've been asked about what are the spheres, what's the deeper meaning behind it. To me, the spheres are all the cities that we played at, and, now that we're beyond all that, and you can listen back to it, and, it represents what we've been doing for the last 21 months. So that's kind of how we came up with that title. But I agree, especially with live albums, it gets more and more tricky because, there are quite some out there, and, lots of names are taken already. But I think Life Beyond the Spheres, to me, it sounds very nice. It fits to the Blind Guardian kind of names, It made sense for me.
Definitely. You've released 2 live albums in the past, one you mentioned before. When do you decide to record a new live album?
For us, we felt that the time was right now because the previous one was 14 years ago. And since that previous live album, we put out 3 new studio albums. Plus, we had a new drummer in the band. Frederick joined us in 2004, so pretty much immediately after we put out that previous live album. So we felt the time was right to do something again. There should be a couple of new studio albums at least between live albums, because I don't think it makes sense to put out a live album, every year, once you tour, you release a live album. I don't really like that. There should be new content that you can put on that album to add something different compared to whatever you might have done in live albums before. And, with this one, as I said, we had 3 studio albums in between, and, we also tried to dig out some old classics, some rare songs that we never played or only rarely played, didn't play in a while. And we tried to put together a very interesting package that kind of reflects what we've been doing on that last tour. And as I said, the time just felt right. When we finished the previous studio album, Beyond the Red Mirror, we just sat down and thought, we think it's the right time to do something. And, well, we went for it and did it. And here we are talking about it now.
With the albums the songs you play rarely, this is kind of a stupid question. It's kind of obviously you can't play all the tracks all the time. But why are there some tracks that kind of don't get played often and can sort of come to be called rarely played?
First of all, obviously, as you said yourself, we can't play them all because otherwise we would be playing 10-hour-long shows, and that would be pretty exhausting. And it's just, it's more with each new studio album that we put out, it gets more and more difficult to find the right set list, because obviously when you put out a new album, you want to play new songs, because after all, that's why you go on tour. You want to, show the people, hey, this is the new album, check it out. So on this tour, I think we played 5 songs altogether from the new album. Then there are those whatever you want to call them, all-time classics that you just have to play because otherwise people will crucify you. Talking about songs like Nightfall or Mirror Mirror or Bart song, stuff like that. But then there's a part that you can just fill up with songs that you just like. You feel like playing them, or you didn't play them in a while. But it's getting more and more difficult each time. And by now we already started from time to time kicking out some of those classics, because we just don't want to be too predictable. So there were quite some shows where we did not play Valhalla. There even was a show where we didn't play the Bart song. And, obviously we love playing those songs and we know what they mean to people. But if we always play those classics, at some point the set list will be very, very static. And it will be the same thing every single night because people just take for granted that we'll play those songs. And that's why we like messing around with it a bit. And people should not take any song for granted. We might change everything at some point. But those rarely played songs, it's just, a song like Banished from Sanctuary, for example, we didn't play in quite some time. And, it's just fun bringing them back at some point. We've been playing Banished a lot in the early days. I mean, it has been taken from our second album, so it's a quite old song for us. And at some point, you like giving songs a break. If you play them for a couple of tours, then you reach a point where you say, we'll skip it on this tour. And then at some point you kind of rediscover those songs and you feel like, hey, let's play that one again, or maybe let's play for the first time with different songs. It's a good thing. And but that is just one example. For example, on this tour we brought back the script for My Requiem, which we didn't play in quite some years. And at some point after we put out Imaginations, that was one of the main songs that we played live, and I really enjoyed it. But at some point I got tired of playing it live because we just played it too much, I think, and then we gave it a rest. And when we put it back in the set now for this tour, it was amazing. It just felt right. So sometimes you just have to give songs a break, and then a couple of years later you can dig them out again, and you will be enjoying them a lot more than compared to if you would be playing them all the time.
In terms of preparing for the recording a live album, you obviously you playing live shows, but apart from just the very playing the show, what goes into making that happen? What needs to be done to get the recording all working?
Well, obviously you have to take a recording system with you or rent it or whatever. And we recorded pretty much every single show on that tour. And in the end, for the album, we focused on the first European block that we played, because there we had the same recording setup with us every single night. It was the full production. It was the same PA every night. So the recordings themselves had a certain consistency that worked very well for putting together that album. But, as I said, obviously you have to take the recording equipment with you, which is not that difficult today because, you can record a whole show with a laptop, basically, all the DAWs, whether it's Pro Tools or Logic or Cubase or whatever you want to use for recording, you can run it on a laptop, and, the signals, they all go to the front of house desk anyway, because after all, you're playing a gig. So everything is there and just has to be traced to the laptop, to the recording setup. And most of the recordings have been done by our front of house guy. And, on some days, our producer, Charlie, was there as well, took care of the recordings himself. But, it was fairly easy to do it. And the good thing is, our live setup changed in a way that we started using digital amps a couple of years ago. So I'm using Fractal Audio's Axe-Fx, and Andre is using the Kemper. And also our bass player Barend is using some digital stuff, which has the advantage, if you're using tube amps, they sound different every single day, depending on the temperature of the tubes, depending on the room's acoustics, depending on is the microphone placed perfectly at the same spot in front of the cabinet every night. And with an XFX or a Kemper, you plug in the cable and you sound exactly 100% the same every single night. So you do a couple of sound checks at the beginning of the tour, then you're good to go. You don't even need to do sound checks anymore because the sound is going straight to the mixing console. From there, it's going straight back to our in-ear or to the PA, and you sound exactly the same. You sound exactly the way you want to sound. And that makes life on the road much easier. And also, recordings obviously benefit from this because, you're completely independent of room acoustics or anything. And you know what the guitars or the bass in that point as well will sound like. You get a real consistent sound every single night. And that makes it much easier to put together a live album that uses tracks that were recorded at different shows. Because obviously, a venue in whatever Germany might sound completely different compared to the next day where you played in wherever on that planet, doesn't matter. Venues tend to sound different, but like this, you eliminate a part of those differences and you get a way more consistent sound. So that helped a lot.
In terms of actually playing, the sort of other side of the equation, is a good live performance for the audience the same as what you are looking for in a good live performance for the audio recording?
Not necessarily. Let's put it like this. I think the audience can also really enjoy a show where you're giving every ounce of energy into the set, but you might play more sloppy. And obviously, the more you jump around on stage, the more sloppy your playing might get, because, if I stand still, I can play every night perfectly fine, and if I constantly run around, I might f*** up from time to time. And I think the audience doesn't really care if you f*** up in a song, if you play a wrong note for a second, nobody in the audience will really care if the energy is right, and everybody will just have a good time and nobody gives a f***. But obviously, you don't want to have wrong notes on a live recording that you put out on CD. And, if you listen to that CD, you don't want to listen to that up day in, day out. So if you're focusing on choosing the right performance for a live album, you're obviously also focusing on your performance itself and not just on the energy of the gig or the energy of your playing. That plays a part as well, of course, a very important part, but you try to pick the ones where you didn't make any mistakes. So I think that's a difference for the audience. If I'm, I've just been at a festival, 3-day festival over the last weekend myself. And, if some of the bands might made some mistakes, most likely I didn't even realize it because I just went for the moment and enjoyed the gig. But if you listen to mistakes on a live album, that's not so enjoyable. So that definitely makes a difference for if you're in a band or if you're in the audience.
In terms of sort of another aspect of the recording, what I find is, obviously with power metal, really important aspect of it is the audience participation. I mean, them singing along, particularly in songs like A Nightfall and The Last Candle. Is it any sort of effort to make sure that comes through in the recording, or does that come through sort of over the mics that you're already using?
No, you have to put up special mics. If you're not miking the audience, you won't hear it, and then you'll get a very static live recording because the audience part is just not there. The microphones. If we would only use, for example, our vocal microphones on stage, you wouldn't hear much of the audience. So we really put up microphones that are only there to record the audience participation and their singing. So we have that on tape or on hard disk as well. And as you mentioned, it's a vital part of any show. I mean, it doesn't matter how good we are on stage. The audience has to be there as well. The audience has to do their part. They have to do their singings and the choirs and everything. And only like this, a show becomes special. If only the band is playing well, that's one point. But the audience is the other half of what makes a magic show. And obviously, we try to cover that and capture that for the live recording. So we really take care of it. There were lots of microphones in the audience to record their singing as well, because otherwise the live album would not sound like the actual gig sounded. Because obviously, in the gig, you hear all the audience, and it has to be there for the album as well.
When you've got the stuff recorded, and off the tour or even on the tour, however you did it, you've got the stuff, you've got the 10 shows, you listen to them. Who's going through and picking the songs, and how do you kind of differentiate between the two songs? You've got at least 10 versions of the same song. How do you pick between one or another?
You just have to make notes. As I said, we recorded pretty much every single show, so we're talking about, I don't know, 150 shows or something like that, but we focused only on the first European block, which are still like 40 shows, 35, 40 shows, I don't know. And you just have to really listen to the stuff and make notes. And the problem is that I think any musician will pay attention to his own performance first. I think it's a natural thing, but obviously you have to overcome this and pay attention to the whole band performance, because, you know, nobody cares if you played well. If the rest of the performance is not what it is supposed to be, then nobody gives a f*** if you played the show of your life. And so, it's really going through the sets, making notes, and it's a quite long process. I mean, the good thing is that actually while we have been on the road, our producer Charlie already started this, and he went through shows and made mixes for us that we could listen to later, and he already made notes and said, you know, don't bother listening to that show or to that song, whatever, because you f***ed up there, or there was something that went wrong, whatever. So it made it a bit easier, but in the end you have to listen to everything, you have to make notes, and in the end you have to compare your notes and hopefully find takes that everybody agrees on, and then you can go for that take. And, you know, most of the time, obviously, there are more than just one song that everybody likes, you know, or more than one recording of a song. But if you can narrow it to, whatever, 3 versions of Nightfall, that helps to, then you focus on those 3 suggestions again and try to pick the best one. It's just a process of narrowing it down step by step, and until the end come up with whatever ended on the album.
Let's change the pace a bit. I've read a little bit about that you're preparing a new album, or orchestra album. Where's that at? What can you tell us about that?
Well, that's the kind of never-ending story for Blind Guardian, because actually we started with that one like 20 years ago, something like that. At least that's when the idea was born, and we started on writing and planning everything. The music is pretty much recorded already since some time. What was missing is Hansi's vocals, and the original idea was for him to go back into the studio in breaks that we had in between touring blocks and finishes his vocal recordings then. But we had to forget about that, because touring is way too demanding for his voice. So he needed those breaks to rest and get his voice back in shape for the next tour block. And it was not in a proper shape for album recordings. So we had to abandon that plan, and he will finish his vocal recordings this year, because we'll only play a handful of shows, so there's all the time in the world to properly finish those recordings. Then there's just mixing and mastering, and we can finally put out that album next year, after talking about it forever, or what feels like forever. It's typical Blind Guardian music. It's all original music, so it's not that we took some of our old songs and had them played by an orchestra. It's all original music. It's Hansi singing. It's all the typical Blind Guardian, you know, melody lines and build-ups. But it's not a metal band playing. It's an orchestra playing. So it's kind of hard to describe it if you haven't heard it. So people have to hear it for themselves, and well, obviously I say so. It sounds amazing. But, you know, I'm pretty sure that once people will be able to listen to it, they will agree. So it's something very, very special, and finally it will come out next year.
Now, I've read that you sort of describe yourself as a rhythm guitar player, which sort of isn't surprising because you play rhythm guitar. But, yeah. Like, describing yourself as that, what kind of do you think distinguishes a rhythm and lead guitar person? Is there something inherent in people which means they're one or the other?
Not necessarily. because after all, it's not that I only play rhythm. I play solos in a couple of songs. I play tons of harmony leads, so it's not that I'm only playing rhythm guitar. As well as Andre is obviously also playing rhythm guitar. He's not playing lead guitar 100% of every song, but the thing for me is my main influence. When I started to be into music and into metal, and I was learning to play guitar at that time, I think my main influences came from Black Sabbath and from Tony Iommi. I remember clearly sitting in my room back then, putting on, a Black Sabbath album and trying to figure out how to play all those riffs, starting with Iron Man and NIB and you name it, whatever. I learned all those songs. I don't know if this is the reason for me preferring to play rhythm guitar, but the reason I consider myself to be a rhythm guitar player foremost is, if you ask me, you want to play the solo in that song or you want to play rhythm, I will pick rhythm guitar because I just enjoy it. I don't mind playing solos. I do it from time to time. There are a couple of Blind Guardian songs where I play the solo, and as I said, I also enjoy playing all the harmony lead guitar stuff, because obviously in Blind Guardian there's tons of built-up guitar layers, and whenever we feel that more than just one of those voices is needed live, then I switch to lead guitar in that moment. So I enjoy that as well. But I think, deep inside of me, I just prefer rhythm guitar for whatever reason. And the funny thing is, a lot of people seem to think of lead guitar of being better or more important or worthy or whatever you want to call it. And I think that's because, both are parts of the song. Lead guitars belong to Blind Guardian just as rhythm guitars belong to Blind Guardian. And whether you mute one or the other in a recording, the version without one of those two aspects will suck. Both have to be there to make the songs sound like they do. So, I don't see, and that's not related only to Blind Guardian, I see it like that in general. I don't see rhythm guitar playing as inferior to lead guitar playing. I mean, take a band like Metallica. Can you imagine Metallica without James Hetfield? I can't. And it's like both is fine for me. I just prefer rhythm guitar for whatever reason. I just enjoy playing heavy riffs, and I think that's my Tony Iommi influence. But yeah, that's the reason why I consider myself to be a rhythm guitar player first, and only then second place a lead guitar player, which I do as well.
You've been with Blind Guardian, I think, for 30 years now.
Yeah.
How have you? That's a long time for anyone to do anything. How have you stayed doing that for so long, and what sort of keeps you sort of passionate about Blind Guardian?
There's one simple answer. I love what I'm doing. I mean, this when we started back then, when we formed the band, we had this dream about, being or becoming a professional band, about recording albums and being able to tour and all that. And that has always been our goal, our vision. And we put a lot of hard work in this. We were very focused, and we never had a plan B. We were so convinced that this would work for us. We never doubted it. Obviously, there was never a guarantee that it would work, but, we made it work. And we still enjoy what we're doing. I don't want to do anything else. I want to play in this band. I want to play this kind of music. I want to record stuff. I want to be able to go on tour. I enjoy every single second of my life as a musician. And, that's... The other day, somebody asked me, how do you motivate yourself? I don't have to. I just get up and I'm sitting in my studio right now, and I can't enter this room. I have several guitars hanging here behind me on the wall. I can't enter this room without picking up one of the guitars and fiddle around with it, even if it's just for a minute. If I want to enter that room just to grab a pen because I want to make some notes on anything, as soon as I enter this room, I pick up a guitar and I play a couple of chords or whatever. I just love this. And so that's what keeps me going. And I know it's the same for the other guys. We just enjoy our life. We enjoy what we are doing. We enjoy the music that we are playing. So, there's no extra motivation needed. Just we love exactly the way our life goes. It's just what we wanted to do.
That's really awesome. Blind Guardian will be releasing their live album, Live Beyond the Spheres, on July 7th. Marcus, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
It's been a pleasure for me as well. Thank you for your time, and hope to see you on the road whenever we come back to you.
Thanks for listening to the Moshpit Backstage podcast. You can subscribe to us on iTunes and Omni. To find out more about the show, go to www.syn.org.au/moshpit. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/moshpitonsyn and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at moshpitsyn. The regular Moshpit radio show broadcasts punk, rock and metal tunes and interviews every Thursday nights on SYN 9.7 on FM and digital radios. Listeners outside of Melbourne, Australia can stream SYN 9.7 online at www.syn.org.au. Thanks to Vintage Ruin for the music.
Hi, this is Tommaso from Flashgun Apocalypse.
Hi, I'm Enid from Girls School.
I am Phoebe Pinnock from Heavenly Axe.
Hey, this is Gary Olney of the Misfits.
Hey, this is Kat Sproul from Horizon's Edge, and you're listening to The Mosh Pit on SYN FM.
Hi, this is Einar from Leopard.
Hi, I'm Virginia Lilly from the band Lily.
This is Raul from 1349.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Ali from Zebrahead.
Hey, everybody, this is Charlie Benante with Anthrax, and you are listening to The Mosh Pit on SYN.